this puppy to record. Hard for me sometimes to remember that in the morning, no doubt. Screen share, let's click that button. No, not yet. Got to pull this one up here. Then I'll pull this. And then I click this. And then over here, this happens. Oh, technology, everybody. Can you see it? Can you at least see the screen share that I'm doing? Great. All right, so Deviance. And look, I'm not the first person to think that politicians or somebody sitting in the White House is deviant. That probably has been something that everyone has thought from some perspective at some time or another. And it's not just about politicians. Think about our parents. How many of us are pretty sure at times that our parents are absolutely deviant with whatever. Maybe it's punishment, maybe it's with their behavior, or maybe it's with the TV shows they like to watch. Who knows? But let's look at this. So could be considered deviant. That little girl has an AK-47, but she looks happy, but still, it's an AK-47. Skateboarding. That's right. It's my generation that made them put up those signs, no skating or inline skating or rollerblading. I'm not even sure what rollerblading is. Sounds embarrassing. Just kidding. Black Power at the Olympics. Obviously, look, we have to understand that all of this that's going on right now, it's not really the first time that this has happened throughout history. We have faced many of these similar challenges before, like Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. That's nothing new. But the reaction to it, the heavy reaction to somebody kneeling, again, puts deviance or what might be deviant, and then what really is deviant, and what people think. It really puts it in a different light. So to me, we can look at this again. Bodybuilder, that looks like Kim Cattrall from Mannequin. That looks like her face on top of that body, but I could be wrong. I'm kind of a Kim Cattrall fan. I like bad 80s movies. Then we've got a home birth. Can a home birth be considered deviant? I suppose from a certain point of view, and we'll get on to that. Here, really, okay, so here's the deal. All deviance, you remember that part, and maybe you don't, so that's fine, but if you do, it's the part in Return of the Jedi, where Luke shows up, or excuse me, Empire, where Luke shows up to Dagobah, and he's not dying, he's passing through the Force, because death is not a concept, right? Like, it's very Buddhist. And he's like, pulls up the covers even like a grumpy old man. He's like, nah, let's not talk about this right now. And Luke's like, come on, let's talk about this. And finally Yoda talks about it. And then he, fuses with the Force. That's what's going to happen to me someday. And it's disappointment. It's going to happen to all of us someday. But he goes outside, right? And who shows up? Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan the ghost. And what's Obi-Wan say? Because Luke's like, man, you should have told me. And Obi-Wan's like, well, I told you the truth from a certain point of view. Well, thanks a lot, jerk, right? Like, you didn't really tell me, and now I got to go with Dad. I got to go fight Dad. So what's the deal? Well, here's the deal. Not just referencing Star Wars, but the reality here is, yeah, from a certain point of view, almost anything, even a state of being, even just you, sitting out in public, doing your homework, minding your own business, could be deviant to somebody. And of course, as I introduce the chapter, deviance is about a perceived difference. Something's different about that thing, right? See, look down here. Something's different about that thing. What's she doing birthing at home? What's that? How are you filling up a pool in your house? That can't be very safe. Well, actually, it's how human beings birthed all until the last 100 years, and even only part of that last 100 years, right? But to some, deviant. And we'll look at this today. Then down there, big mouth. So perceived difference and a moral judgment. That's what deviance is all about. A perceived difference and someone making a moral judgment. Now, whoever makes that moral judgment, like I said before, could be the most moralist, soulless person out there. That being said, we have to look at other things like power and access and gender and race, because, that right there, that right there is cause for us to have to look at who is determining what's deviant and why. Anyway, that cartoon, Big Mouth, if you haven't seen that, that's pretty phenomenal. And then cannabis, which I guess boring, right, nowadays for us here in 2020. Like I said, I've got students that are hitting vape pens in Clark before. They just used to hit it and then wave at me across campus. Now it's like right before class. Is that deviant? I don't know. Maybe maybe not anymore. It depends, right? And there's, Yao Ming. So somebody who's just, like I said, their physical presence, however they look, whatever the scene is that people want to make that judgment, they could. So deviance is a lot of things, right? And of course, we got to ask ourselves a whole bunch of questions. Whose artwork? Who is that? Anybody know the artist there? Speaking of deviance. I got time this morning. Maybe I'll look up here at the chat. Yep, chat. Banksy. Yep, there you go, Allie. Absolutely. Yep, Banksy doing most of his artwork on other buildings, right, that he doesn't own, tagging it, spray painting it. I mean, I think they're absolutely brilliant. That doesn't mean that it's not deviant to some people. Now, what's really deviant is that people started to find them and then try and keep them. like before you'd call the cops, but because it's worth like $1 million now, they're trying to keep it, right? Interesting stuff. And a great deviant piece actually about Banksy, he actually had a piece of his artwork that he let somebody get a hold of and frame, and in the back of the frame, and it went to auction, like was going to be sold for several $1 million and was.
Wasn't there a paper shredder in it?
Yes, there was. He hid a paper shredder in the back of it, and the second it was sold, somebody pressed a button and the whole piece of artwork dropped through the bottom, which had a paper shredder, and shredded in front of everyone in the room, who was horrified. I mean, the people don't know I said people don't know it's a bomb. It's not. But it just starts making noise and spits this artwork out and shreds the whole thing. Well done, Banksy. Well done. It was brilliant. And I'm sure, like, the looks on the faces of the people who were going to get the commission from selling that, yeah, that was also priceless. Okay. Am I deviant? I've got a hint for you all. I'm going to get in the mic, wink, wink, or that's not a mic, that's a camera. And I'm going to wink at you. You're all deviant. I'm looking at some of your faces, and I can tell by the way that you smile who's more deviant than others. I can even see someone with a mask on that I'm quite sure is very deviant, even though you're not giving yourself away. What about me? What about your teacher? You'll have time to answer that question. Don't worry. All right. What does deviance mean? And if you've already watched the chapter 6 video, I'm just going to at least introduce us, because I feel like it's good to do an intro lecture now. I'm like, I want to get into this more, doing a little bit more live stuff with the class, talking about it, making it a little bit more real. That being said, I didn't dress up quite as well as I did in those videos. So if you haven't seen the Deviance videos yet on YouTube, please check them out. What does deviance mean? And, we have our own idea, just like karma, but obviously everybody's got a different definition of it. So deviance means a lot of things. What we're looking for here is a sociological definition of deviance, though, right? How do we define deviance, deviant behavior? Why are some things considered deviant while others are not? Why consider the concept of social control when talking about deviance? And social control is really, it's awesome. Deviance is, all of this is super exciting. Like the thought that social control is, it's not conspiracy stuff. It's society's attempt to regulate your thoughts and behaviors. What? Yeah. I mean, you think that you're shopping around at a certain time of day, being a single dude in your 30s, and the music that they're playing at the grocery store isn't trying to get you to buy more Cheese Whiz? Wrong. Social control is a big thing. It's kind of like that advertising rule. The advertising rule is if you hear it 10 times or more, you got to have it. They know this, right? Got to have Charmin, got to have Charmin, got to have Charmin, got to have Charmin. Got to have Charmin 10 times, and then all of a sudden you're in the store and you're like, I got to have Charmin or I'm going to chafe. I do not know why, but I am positive that that's the thing, okay? What about social control and how it impacts your life? Who is deviant? Sorry for pointing. Who is deviant on campus and why? Are there groups of people that are considered more deviant than others on campus? Is it the athletes? Is it the farm and ag folks with the boots and the really huge belt buckle and the bedazzled jeans? I mean, who is it? Can we tell? Is it professors, right? Is it professors with pointy leather shoes and tight pants? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see here. And we'll talk about it. And then why are some people considered deviant and not others? All these, I think, fantastic questions. Shred it. And mask wearers versus non-mask wearers. Fraternities and sororities. There's so much deviance. And it's exciting. Now, We could talk about that in a minute, because we'll talk about the deviance of or how we see things, because this is what we're really here to do. It's funny because obviously, excuse me, I can't see anything. I'm an opinionated individual. Of course I am, right? So are you. But what we need to do is be able to look at things always from multiple perspectives. That's what we do here in sociology. Yes, I already have my inclination. You already think you know what's deviant, da. That being said, if anybody has told you that things are conservative or liberal, or has anybody told you that things are black and white, and it's just one or the other, they've done you a terrible disservice in this life, usually adults. Things are gradations. Things are not black or white. There are many, many hundreds of thousands or infinite versions of gray. So that's why we're going to look at something like mask wearing or fraternities and sororities or college or marriage. We're going to look at all these things, politics, as deviant. Like, let's look at how could somebody see that as deviant? How could that not be considered deviant? Now, there are some times when it's just going to be deviant no matter what. I mean, look at these losers on top here that stole somebody's bed sheets, made pointy hats out of them, can't see where they're going a lick. And I'm pretty sure that if I were to call the dude a loser, right? Or even maybe even O.J. Simpson, somebody might take offense. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that because of norms and values that have changed, that people have worked so hard over time for equality, that I can look at those guys on top, pretty much across that straight line, including serial murderer Jeffrey Dahmer, and say losers. All right? Now, that doesn't mean, though, that some folks out there do not consider those folks, or any of these folks here, Ted Nugent, put something on, good God, man, did not consider them deviant, right? Some people do not. For some people, waking up and putting on your best bed sheets and going out and spreading a little bit of hate is absolutely normal and not deviant. So again, that's that from a certain point of view things. And then not everybody necessarily is going to take a whole bunch of mescaline like the dude. Talk about that later. All right. Does everyone, regardless of race, run the same risk of being sent to prison if they engage in illegal drug use? What's that answer? Yeah, that answer is no. Thank you. I see some head shakes. And not even no, it's no. It's all of that. So share of all drug users, people that reported that they use drugs, 66% of non-Hispanic white folks, pale, peachish, freckled folks of European descent, and 12.6% of African Americans that were asked. Then we go to the share of inmates in state or federal prison convicted of drug offenses, and you've got 50% of the prison population compared to 12% of the users, and only 30% of the prison population compared to 66%. Now, what we do know is that people who are pulled over, people who of color who are pulled over twice as much. You're twice as likely to get pulled over if you're a person of color. And this is where SOCH is awesome and statistics are important, you are half as likely, right, as a person of European descent, you're half as likely to actually, you're twice as likely, to be carrying drugs, while people of color are twice as likely to be pulled over, right? So what sense does that mean? That's when we start to look at deviance in policing, right? Like from a certain point of view, right? The police are there to help and protect and serve. If we look at how that plays out, we know that people who have all sorts of drugs in their cars are like, beep, beep, thanks, see you later, driving right past the cops, while people are like, knuckling it on the steering wheel, getting pulled over, that don't have any, that know that just getting pulled over by the police is risking their life. Now, disappointing, and police departments can do better, though it doesn't seem like there's a big push for that to do better. And when the fraternal order of police departments all across the United States choose a candidate, sort of unilaterally across the board, it's concerning when in Aurora just this weekend, right? You have a young African-American female who is cuffed and thrown in the back of the car on her head. This happened in Colorado over the weekend, and they drove her to the police station while she was begging for her life. When they open up the door, she's still head down, like on her neck in the back of the cop car. Look for it. Happens every single day in this country, and maybe we could say, hey, the police are being deviant. And if you don't say it in a perfect way and you don't have the measure of power, then it scares people because you say defund and what, you know, obviously there's a lot going on there, and we're not going to tackle that right now. But we are going to say that we know that profiling is a big part of policing, even when we know that statistically the people who are being profiled are not the ones likely to have the drugs. So if you really want to make drug busts and drug stops and drug arrests, we know who to arrest. We, meaning they know who to arrest, and it's not the folks that they are arresting. All right. Ooh, incriminating photo, but it's from a little while ago. That's right. That's right. Catfish posse. I like to flash as many signs as I can. I used to flash this one all the time. This is just in case you might live in Loveland. It was just me, and the rest of my neighborhood was all 80-year-old retirees, and I used to flash this one, Loveland, North Side. And the, you know, my 90-year-old neighbor, he'd get out of his car and he'd be like, he'd give me one of those, and I'd be like, cool, man, it's cool. So what is this going on here? All right. Today, speeding. I have not driven in the car yet today. Now, normally, I'd be driving to class to give this lecture, and I'd be going down Elizabeth Street, and I would absolutely be speeding. I know I shouldn't, but I come from a magical place where I learned to drive called Chicago. All right. Lizzo fan. Yeah, can being a Lizzo fan, can that be deviant? Sure. Absolutely. I mean, what I really listens to gangster rap. I got that up on there too. Now, my collection is full of Snoop and Dre and Biggie and Pac and you name it. It's some of the most raw, violent stuff ever. But maybe not by 2020 standards. I have no idea, right? So maybe that's considered deviant by some people. Eating organic. All right, I'm going to go to you watching the lecture. How could eating organic be considered deviant? Anybody? Oh, wait, I got all day.
I feel like because it's like unconventional, people get offended when other people eat organic because they think it's like attacking them just because it's something different. It's like therefore deviant from the majority's perspective who eats conventionally.
Yeah, great. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird, right? You know, like when I'm in conversations with people, because Julie works at Vitamin Cottage, we eat almost all organic. If I like sort of lay that out there, even if it pertains to the conversation, I definitely feel like people think they might be being attacked by my food choice, which has nothing to do with them. Same thing though, right? If you say I'm vegan now, right? I'm vegan, or I'm going to try vegetarianism and do something, you could get all sorts of shade thrown at you for something that's a decision that you might not even care about whether the animal lives or dies, but you have had enough bad meat or you had an allergic reaction to something happened where you're going to try something else. But the second you kind of turn your back on that meat posse, because there's a catfish posse, but there's also a meat posse, right? Second you turn your back on that posse, look out, right? All right, good. Hates cell phones. Yeah, there's my cell phone. It's got packing tape on it. It's broken. I don't really care. I only got it. Let me blow your minds. Here's what's deviant. I think I just got this phone like 4 years ago. And my wife didn't have a phone until 4 years ago. Do you know that if 10 years ago I was just getting a cell phone, I'd be late to the game? But I just got it 4 years ago. So that was really deviant, asking people to borrow their phones. And I'll tell you what, 15 years ago, it didn't used to be so deviant. But then people started to put their entire lives on their phones, including all sorts of pictures and everything else that maybe like all of a sudden their phone held everything about them, right? And next thing you know, borrowing a phone got that much harder. You know, like if I were to ask you in class, can I borrow your phone? There'd be some people that are like, that's not working for some reason. I'm sorry. All right. In the past, I don't know if I should read this list off because my son is in the other room. So, Storm, you're not listening, are you? No. All right. Anti-war protester. Yep. You bet. That was me. Cohabitation. All right. So this is called, the more formal word for it is called shacking up. Actually, that's the least formal word. That's what my parents would have called it. And were my parents, did my parents think that moving in with my girlfriend second year in college was deviant? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And actually, she said, this place is a fire trap, right? Moms say that kind of thing. This apartment's a fire trap. And that apartment burned down. Yeah, you never want your mom to be right. We got in there in late August, and November 13th, we both woke up and the whole apartment was on fire. I lost everything, had to bail out onto the roof. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm here this close to passing out in my sleep, but I'm here. I made it. So, pot. Did inhale plenty. Gosh, yeah, this is back in the day. This isn't responsible 47-year-old professor me, right? This is in the past. The past could be as far back as 30 years or 30 seconds ago, right? All right. Theft of a chocolate bar. I'm not proud of this, Storm. Don't ever do that. Yeah, maybe we went into a gas station and we thought we were cool. But obviously, I'm not that deviant of a thief when my big score was stealing one chocolate bar once. I know. That's what happens when teachers' kids go out on a crime spree. We get a chocolate bar. All right. In the future, though, I mean, come on. Deviant? It's deviant. I'm excited about it. I don't know, something with my tractor. Wasn't there a guy in Colorado several years ago that got on his tractor up in South Park or somewhere and started running into stuff? The load on the front of my tractor has a bunch of spikes on it. I mean, I'm excited to find out. What if Front Range fires me? Maybe I'll drive through their parking lot, crushing cars with my track. I don't know, right? Who knows? But I'm excited to find out because deviance is a big deal for us as human beings. All right. So in the past, hippies, cohabitation is still deviant, some religions, even though it's extremely mainstream. Granby. Oh, did somebody write? Is that where that guy was from? Is he the bulldozer guy, though, or something? I can't remember. But
yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Lane.
it was in Granby, and he had a bulldozer that he coated in cement and rebar, so he could just crush their buildings and the police couldn't get to him.
Sounds like a plan, bro. Except, I mean, I've taught 700, 800 students a semester for 10 years, and nobody knows who I am. I'm not famous. I could just decide to get in my tractor and be remembered. Look at Granby. People knew this. We knew this. So there's a difference between happy and famous, and certainly a difference between the type of deviance that we're willing to engage in. But like I said, for the future, mostly I'm just excited to find out. Let's look at some things here. Let's pick some things and talk about why they might be considered deviant or not. Because again, as a sociologist for so many years, I am really trained to see as many sides of this as possible, and I think that that's what benefits us all. So let's pick one that I like, home birth. Let's pick home birth. Julie did a home birth. Excuse me, please. So sorry. And we did a home birth, and it was 39 hours was Julie's first labor. So not at all like a movie, right? You see a TV show and you're like, get in the car, go, 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 go. We were at Red Rocks, and the show got over, and we got to the bottom of the parking lot, widespread panic, and she's like, we got to go. And we're standing around with some friends, right? And I'm like, we got to go. We got to go. She's like, no, bro, we got to go. And I was like, ah! And so, and I wasn't drinking all weekend, so drove back. All right, I'll be honest. She drove back. I was too nervous. She's like, give me the keys. I'm going to drive back. She drove back. That was Saturday night late. She didn't have Storm. He wasn't born until Monday afternoon. So there we go. That's my home. That's the first one was 39 hours. Zion was 9. And that's muscle memory for you, right? That's muscle memory. That's how amazing the human body is right there. All right. So home birth versus hospital birth. Now, that does happen sometimes. I had a friend of mine from college, Ira. You're not here, Ira, but I'm giving you huge props this morning. They live in Evergreen. Wife went into labor, got in the car, drove 10 minutes down the mountain, 15 minutes down the mountain, had to pull over, got in the back seat, delivered the baby, took off his shoelace, tied the umbilical cord, and then drove to the hospital. Woo, woo. So it does happen once in a while. I'm glad that didn't happen to me, but Ira's hardcore. So what could be like deviant about a home birth, or what could be deviant about a hospital birth? How can we see birthing is deviant or not deviant? Because I think this is a good one. It's not political. Yeah, go ahead, man.
So, we just had our little girl not too long ago.
Speaking of birthing.
Speaking of birthing. And we wanted to do a home birth. That it was something that was on the table.
Right.
But due to my wife has a cousin who has cerebral palsy because of a botched home birth. So from her parents' perspective, a home birth was not an option. And they were like, putting their foot down, like it's not going to happen. So that's how they perceived that it was, deviant.
Okay. Yeah. So somebody who's got, right, like some type of experience, like, oh, here's a home birth that I know of, that can't be safe, and I don't want you to do that. It was interesting for us. It was a much different scene for us because with 5 weeks left, we went to visit the hospital, and we visited the hospital, did the little hospital tour, and went out to the car, and we said, okay, yes or no on 3. 1, 2, 3. And we both said no. Like resounding no. Like hell no, no. And that was with 5 weeks left. So not only did we answer no, but we put ourselves in kind of a spot where we're like, well, I guess we better find a midwife. Right? Okay, good. What else? And yes, your daughter is adorable.
I have a friend who has 5 kids. She had all of them at home, no drugs or anything, because she's the badass.
Yeah.
She got a lot of judgment from her family for that, just because they said she was putting her kids at risk. She was putting herself at risk. It wasn't like the normal thing to do. It was like a really hippie thing to do. And she got a lot of flack for it. But then on the flip side, I think hospital birth could be seen as deviant because you hear a lot of stories about how they don't actually respect the mother's wishes. There can be complications that don't need to arise. There's all sorts of things that I've read that hospitals go against what the family actually wants and won't listen to the mother and things like that. So I can see both sides of it.
Yeah, it's really important to have a birthing plan when you roll up into a hospital, because a hospital is a place that serves a number of people, like McDonald's. I mean, it's not McDonald's, but they got another person that's going to be rolling in there to have a baby soon. So you got to do your thing, and I think that, yeah, those are good examples right there. Yeah, our family was, both sides were mortified when we decided with 4 weeks left that we were going to do a home birth. Now, that I'm also a sports fan, right? Bears and Bulls, and the Bears were awful this weekend, like I thought they would be. So I looked at statistics. This is going to sound horrible to you. I'm a sports guy, so I'm like, show me your statistics. And every midwife has her stats. And the stat line was 269 babies delivered, only 3 hospital visits, and 0 fatalities. That's Michael Jordan. That is Michael Jordan of the birthing world. 269 babies, boom. 3 hospital visits is all. Championship. And that's the interesting thing when we start talking about qualities of a midwife, right? Because this midwife was not all lovey and cuddly. She was like, get it done. And then at about 38 hours, she went in the other room with the doula, and they were having like a little conversation, and I was the only person that was up besides Julie the whole time that was there. And I walked into the room, and I'm like, hey, Dad here. And I'm like, what's the conversation? And she's like, she's got about an hour more, and then we need to go to the hospital. Like her blood pressure, Julie's blood pressure is like somebody might be dead. It's like so low always, so that's a good thing. But I went in the other room right away, and I'm like, Julie, midwives say you got about an hour. Like for us, it was transparent. You're having a meeting, no tell me, I'm telling Julie, and then she was like, boom, got the baby out. Okay, good. So yeah, our relatives definitely worried about safety. Other thoughts, how could you see either birthing in a hospital or home birthing as deviant? I think this is a really great example.
So for my mom, she couldn't have a natural birth, and she couldn't have done like a home birth because she had a car accident when she was a baby. And so it was never even like, none of my family members have never ever done a home birth. So it's just kind of like our tradition to go to hospitals. That's just like what we do.
Yeah, that's a great way that you said it. Tradition. I mean, right? Obviously, we know there's plenty of science going on in a hospital, but this is what our family has done, and that's what we're doing, And so it's always interesting because remember I said deviance is based around a perceived difference and moral judgment, right? So if your family has only ever birthed in a hospital, you got both of those things going on, you know, like here's what we've done and that's why this is so different. And here's, you know, the sort of that perceived moral judgment, you know. Good. Well, how else could we see birthing at home or in a hospital? I think because we normalize hospital birth, that might be a little bit harder for us to look at through a perspective of deviance, but let's try it. Mackenzie, so it says here, could be uncomfortable for other kids. Do you mean the, like other siblings?
Yeah, I mean like other siblings because we have some family friends or like our neighbors across the street from us, and I think all of them were born at home, I want to say, but my friend Chloe, who is about 2 years older than I am, she told me about how like they watched their like little brother be born at home, and she was like, it was beautiful, but like as a kid, she was like super uncomfortable and like
Yeah.
very weird experience to see.
Yeah, and I'm sure in some cultures that's like just the thing that happens, you know, and I'm sure in other cultures it's like until you're the dad, you've never seen a baby be born live. Like you've never even gone on YouTube and looked at what a little baby looks like. You just think it's like kind of like on a TV show where they've already got a blanket around it and stuff, like, you know, but they're not born with a blanket. They're born with a bunch of goo all over them and a lot of blood. I mean, it's a real thing. Okay, good. Yeah. We had a plan for Storm to go over to a neighbor's friend's place, but Zion was so quick overnight, and she had him by like 8 in the morning, and Storm walked out of his room, and she was in the bathtub with Zion, and he brought out his Darth Vader Star Wars figure and handed it to Zion. Like, I'm serious. Within an hour of him being born and a few minutes of him waking up, he took his favorite Star Wars figure, walked it over to him, and gave it to his, oh my gosh, I can't even, excuse me. That was so great. Good memories. All right. There's also the part where you birth at home, and then the midwife leaves, and you both go out to the kitchen to get a drink of water, and you come back, and there's a baby on your bed. And there's no button to push, and there's no nurse hanging out, and you're like, ah! That's a for real moment right there with no strings attached, folks. It's just like, oh, this is you and me on this, right? Hello, I can't peek out of the door and be like, is anybody down the hallway? It's just like my 96-year-old neighbor going, Loveland, Northside. Like, he's no help, right? He's no help. All right, good. Let's talk about birthing in a hospital and deviance. Come up with some specific ways that birthing in a hospital could be deviant. Because there's a whole lot. I think we've got the home birth stuff covered. What do you think?
I guess I could see a birth at a hospital being like less personable. And I don't know if that would really like automatically qualify as being deviant, but like from my personal view, if I were to ever have kids, I definitely wouldn't do it in a hospital. Just because it's like such a foreign area and there's so much you don't have control over.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sure, distractions. I mean, you could be at home with your own music, your own bathroom, your own bed. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot going on there that is familiar to you that might help in the birthing process, because this is a process. This is ancient power that women have been able to harness since forever, right? And up until the last 100 years, women have harnessed that power and done that without a hospital. So we know that throughout most of the history, we haven't had that, you know, that sort of safety net there. Debate around C-section versus natural birth. Yeah, okay, so this is a good one. The cost of a hospital birth gets hairy and crazy fast, okay? So many people that just aren't birthing in the amount of time that Julie birthed in are immediately sent in for C-sections. Now, when you immediately go for a C-section, you've just not only upped it several, like $10,000, $20,000, but you have a very, very, very potentially dangerous surgical procedure going on immediately. That's a scary thing. And the percentages of C-section births, and I'm not saying that's wrong. We're looking at it, so everybody relax. But if you're going to look at it from that perspective, then a non-voluntary or voluntary, I guess they would call it, surgical procedure just to have a baby is something that's almost never happened in history before. So puts the mom in more danger, puts the child in more danger, costs an infinite amount, and that's just for the procedure. Then you have to stay in the hospital for that amount of time. So, right, from a perspective, from a conflict perspective, people could say, hey, you go to the hospital and they are all ready to get you to the tune of $100,000 just to have that baby, or $50,000 to have that baby. Do you have that money? And how come birthing is turned into such a big thing? Because as far as profit, because our infant mortality rate is way down there. We're like 30th in the world for birthing. We have the most technology, we spend the most money, and we're not even in the top 5 for babies living once they're born. Think about that once, folks. If we look at a global perspective, there are people birthing with a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the surgery, and a fraction of the intervention that people are doing, and having more success at having that child live for the first year. So yeah, I think that we can look at those procedures as deviant when you turn a birth into a surgery, or when you take a $2,000 thing, or I think both of our home births cost us in the area of $2,000 or $3,000 total, which is ridiculously cheap. Now that being said, again, I think that there are lots of things to consider for any individual, but looking at this from many sides is really cool, right? Don't know if deviant, sometimes hospitals keep your baby for longer. Look, the amount of kids that wind up in moms in the NICU unit now, through the roof. And I do not know the statistics, but in the last 10 years alone, because of this elective, C-section piece and going in and having your baby, but instead of waiting for you to go into labor, you're now scheduling it. And I would say that this has changed birthing dramatically, and not for the worse and not for the better, but the birthing experience throughout all of history, and then compared to the last 100 years, has changed pretty dramatically. Good. All right. I love this, because now we can see this from many different perspectives. And you're probably not all that interested in birthing right now necessarily, but it's a good social topic to pick. All right. How about masks? Let's take on masks. Let's do something like that. Now we eased ourselves in with birthing. Now let's pick something like masks. So how could we see mask wearing or not wearing as deviant or not deviant? Yeah. And at the same time, somebody says C-sections are a wonderful option. Absolutely. Yep. And so, obviously, and then again, we get to a point, right, where people are like, well, at least the baby's got 5 fingers and toes. I've heard people say that. I said it myself. Is that really my measuring stick? Is that really like all I want out of my birth? So yeah, of course you could see it as a positive thing. Absolutely. All right, let's look at mask wearing. Deviant, not deviant, or why? Because wearing one puts not only yourself at risk, but everybody else. Okay, so deviant, because we're talking about something that's airborne. We're talking about a virus. So deviant not to wear it because you can put other people at risk. Yes, a lot of things like putting on a seatbelt, that's a personal choice, but it has different repercussions, right, than mask wearing or not mask wearing. You can't fail to wear your seatbelt and get somebody sick who you talk to in the drive-thru, or have them die because of your seatbelt choice. Unless you get in an accident, not wearing a seatbelt, fly through the window, and then kill somebody flying. Like, I'm sure that's happened before, like your body itself. But anyway, that's kind of weird to talk about this morning. So why else mask wearing, deviant or not deviant? This requires for us to answer this question. This requires that we step inside another thought process or somebody else's shoes that we might not otherwise understand. And that being said, for as neutral and value neutral as it's important to be while being a sociologist, we cannot be value neutral about some things. I am not value neutral about the KKK. I'm going to struggle to find anything non-deviant about white supremacy groups. And so I'm not asking that people change their minds, just that we try and wrap our heads around the other perspective. What do you think?
I've heard people express for not wearing masks that it's the government trying to control us and all of that, and people are sheep who wear masks, and so those people that believe that, which I'm not one of them, but they think it's deviant to wear a mask because it's all about just a form of control and we need to be free and whatever.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Good perspective. I don't fully understand that perspective. But I'm trying to understand things through the lens of my grandpa. My grandpa went to war to fight for this country, rationed his food. I've got relatives that were drafted into the Vietnam War and did that. right? We're not asking somebody to ration their food. I don't remember. And I know, yes, for the Spanish flu, there were anti-masking protests. Human behavior, again, when I talk about this timeline of the past and the present and the future, hey, like, it's a real thing. We can look at the past to know that what's going on right now isn't necessarily unique. All right, so people are like, that's infringing on my freedom. And I don't feel that way, nor do I understand that, but that is certainly another perspective. The other side, not wearing a mask is not deviant if you're to be in your own home or car. I don't wear a mask if I drive other people in my car, or when people come to my house. Some people I drive or invite over get mad at me for that, but it's my own car space, so why should I wear a mask? Not to say other people can't wear a mask. Sure. We haven't had anybody in our house besides our family. Like the boys' friends have been over, and you go pee by a tree. Actually, we have a porta potty because we have a farm. But we haven't had anybody over since this thing in our house. Some people are comfortable doing that, and if it's your house, then it's your space. Or if it's your car, good. All right. I can't breathe in a mask. Not wearing masks correctly, breathing on others intentionally. Sure, I would say that getting up in people's spaces without a mask during a pandemic is a very aggressive behavior and certainly deviant. Because not only are people trying to push their beliefs on people, but then that's with the added sort of thing in there that you're getting close enough to these people. People do this all the time to my wife at Vitamin Cottage. She's just about done. I think any day here, she's just, see you later. But yeah, so in a way, not just trying to get their opinion on you or get close to you, but risking your life too. So if you're in the middle of a pandemic and somebody is ignoring that and they're perpetuating that, then we have to start to look in a legal way, what kind of responsibility is there, right? All of a sudden we're in, because deviance is like informal deviance, formal deviance, and once you get to formal deviance and beyond there, you're talking about the intervention of like law enforcement. Now we're talking about like, not just sanctions or your neighbors treating you differently or your friends saying something about you behind your back, but we're talking about actual punishable deviance, right? So kind of how do we get into that? Good. All right. Also, it can be seen as deviant when people wear their masks to where it's under their nose. Isn't the correct way advised by the CDC. Yeah, there's some nicknames for that kind of behavior. Mostly, I think it's interesting. I think, and I could be wrong, but I perceive those to be folks that are only halfway on board with that anyway. Because obviously most people know that when you breathe in through your mouth or your nose, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it's not exactly physiologically the same. I'm sure people in here who are doing that as a major would be like, that's not the same. But you could still breathe it in that way. And so somewhat the same. Absolutely good. Okay. Excellent. I love this. So that's just sort of our basic intro to deviance. I have the other chapters. I'm going to release some questions. Okay. So let me look and I'll tell you where to find the questions because I'll be doing it right after here. And it's under March 5th. Okay. So it's under the March 5th folder and it's, are you deviant? Name something. And I'm going to ask you something that you think is deviant and then something that your parents think is deviant. Because that could be two totally different things, right? Like when I was 18 and got my first tattoo at a gig where we were playing at a biker rally in the back of a refrigerated truck. Yeah. I saw they had an autoclave, but I'm just going to go out on a stretch here and say that's not the safest place to get your tattoos in the back of a truck from a stranger. So that being said, I didn't think it was deviant. I got it, but I did not tell my mom. And I was like 18 or 19. I told my dad, and the first thing he said was, good luck showing that to your mom. So he also thought that the tattoo itself, not deviant, but that showing my mom would be the real mistake there, the real deviant piece, right? Anyway, good. So we're going to get into deviance. I think this is a great chapter. It's a ton of fun. I'll ask those questions under the March 5th folder. Dig around. Make sure that you can find them. Don't stress the top hat thing. They're imperfect beyond belief, but it leads to some good discussion. So I always give my students the benefit of the doubt. Is there anything on your minds? Anything that you have a question about? Sorry, I keep touching my camera. I'm just trying to get it to lighten up. I'm sure there's another way to do that, but I'll have to ask my 12-year-old about that since he's the one with his YouTube channel and, whatever. Any questions? Anything else? No? All right, everybody. Be good people. Do good things. Keep each other safe. And whatever you do in regards to this virus, do the opposite of what this administration is doing, please. Like, if you just want a rule of thumb, sometimes your friends that are trouble are a good rule of thumb for you, you know, a good measuring stick. Just use this administration as the measuring stick for not what I should do politically, but what I should not do in regards to science. All right? I think that's pretty clear by now. All right, thanks, everybody. Be good people and do good things. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Thanks.